Good afternoon. I am honored to be here with the second practitioner panel of today. And I'm going to ask them just quickly to introduce themselves and the perspective that they're bringing to this conversation. Earlier, we heard from different panelists and the research, the evidence. And I would argue that this panel is actually responsible for bringing that evidence to life on a day-to-day basis. And so I am honored to be here with them. And I'm just going to turn to each of you. If you could introduce yourself and share with us the perspective that you're bringing.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Garcia, and I am the Deputy Director of the Washington, D.C. office of the Flamboyant Foundation. I have been with Flamboyant for about 2.5 years. So I'm obviously bringing my Flamboyant hat into this. But prior to that, I worked in D.C. public schools for 15 years. And my last 9 years were a school leader at Brightwood, now elementary school, formerly Education Campus in Ward 4, which is up Georgia Avenue, for those of you that know anything about DC, yeah, Ward 4. And so I'm also bringing my perspective as a school leader. As a school leader, I had the opportunity to work with Flamboyant, and it changed my practice. It changed how I led, and it changed the culture of a school. So I hope you will bear with me as I bring both of those perspectives into this conversation today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Epi Kiles. Similar to Emily, I'm wearing 2 hats. So currently I serve as the Director of Training and Facilitation with the Flamboyant Foundation in the DC office. Prior to joining Flamboyant, it was actually 10 years in August. I was introduced to Flamboyant as an early childhood teacher in DC public schools, where I learned the power of home visits, academic partnering, and ongoing communication. Through those experiences, I became a family engagement leader, similar to your role in Boston, at my schools. I moved through different DC PS schools, but we all had partnerships with Flamboyant. So I was continuing that work of engaging families and becoming that leader in my schools. I was also, in addition to being a leader, a family engagement teacher trainer, so training other teachers around the city on family engagement practices. And from that role, I transitioned to full-time with Flamboyant as the Director of Training and Facilitation, continuing to train and build content for teachers around the city.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I'm Sade Harris. I am the daughter of a community organizer and a lifelong educator. My father ran the Springfield Urban League for over 52 years, and I always saw and grew up around really rich conversations, strong Black leaders. But throughout my educational journey, I didn't always see myself reflected both in the teachers or the leadership. I played school for way too long. Probably until high school. I always wanted to be a teacher. That dream became a reality when I taught 4th grade and then became a principal in my hometown of Springfield. So I could provide that mentorship and that representation that I didn't always see growing up. And then went on to be an assistant superintendent, chief engagement officer in Richmond Public Schools, and now have the privilege of supporting school divisions all over the country, build strong systems of engagement, but also teach and am exploring what does engagement look like, or creating an institute at a HBCU. So I'm an assistant professor and special assistant to the Dean of Education at Virginia State University.
Excellent. So I'm sure you feel like I do. This is a very esteemed panel. Prior to joining the National Center for Families Learning as CEO and president, I too was in the district, in the system, working at the district level, state level, and classroom level, which was my most important and interesting work. And so this brings us to the point of how do we translate the evidence to practice? And what I'd like for each of you to do is tell us what evidence have you relied on the most in your work, and maybe provide a story of how that has shifted what's happened at the school, district, or state level.
Great. So I think that the most important research that I learned through my partnership with Flamboyant and now at Flamboyant is that all families play 5 key roles in their child's education. They communicate high expectation, they support learning at home, they monitor their child's performance, they advocate for their child, and they guide their child's educational journey. However, families that have more access to resource and information are able to better play these roles. These roles then result in student achievement. Families who don't have access to data around their students' progress are unable to monitor progress and support learning at home. And oftentimes, as educators, we make excuses for why families can't access data. They don't understand the iReady report, so I'm not going to send it home. I don't know if they know what a sight word is, so I'll just speak in abstract terms and hope they understand. I think the biggest shift for me in my partnership was really understanding that in order to actively engage families, we actually needed to recognize that family engagement is equity work at its base. It is creating the conditions for every family to show up how they can, not how we wish they would and how we want them to. And it is actually changing the idea of what it means. Maybe a family can't show up to parent-teacher conference night. That doesn't mean we don't engage with them in academic partnering around their child. We use these as excuses sometimes, and I have been guilty of it as an educator too. There's a lot that needs to get done in any given day. But I think the biggest thing is really making sure that we are meeting families where they are, which means starting with dispelling the biases that we hold about how families can and should show up in schools.
I'll share a story of a home visit that I had that had a transformational impact on my practice, my classroom, and my school. Home visits are for relationship building. It's an opportunity to get to know your student, get to know their families, and really build trust. During this particular home visit, I learned that my incoming student, I taught pre-K 3 and 4 at the time. My incoming student was 2. She wouldn't be 3 until September. So having to adjust my mind of having a 2-year-old in a classroom for about a month. Also learned that mom was 8 months pregnant. And so she had a lot of anxiety about her daughter starting while they were bringing a new child into the family. I also learned that the daughter had been in daycare previously, and the daycare teachers had noticed a bit of social anxiety as well as noticed a bit of speech concerns. So the family really flagged that for me as that being something that they wanted to work on. And they elevated hopes and dreams that they had for their students. So they wanted their daughter to make friends in this new school and also for her to be able to adjust to have a new sibling in the classroom. That home visit also led an opportunity for us to get to know each other outside of just school. So they wanted to know my background. I wasn't from Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Memphis. I went to the University of North Carolina. I learned that dad went to the University of Maryland. So we were already talking about ACC basketball and all the upcoming games. And I learned how they wanted to be communicated. So they said, you can email us, you can call us, you can text us, whatever you need, we're here for you. So it came to the first day of school, and the parents are both erect, just crying, the nervous energy. But I had learned during my time at the home that the daughter had carried a stuffed bunny with her everywhere that she called Bun Bun. So I had the book Nuffle Bunny in her cubby for the first day of school. Oh, you can read Nuffle Bunny and learn about your Bun Bun. And so that was an opportunity to really make a connection with the student and apply the learning I had on the home visit in the classroom. Continue to send communication and pictures with the parents to really assure them, you know, we are in this together. Your daughter's going to have a great time in school. Sending parent newsletters. In fact, one parent newsletter I sent was about what we had been reading in class. We had been reading a book, Dragons Love Tacos. And mom sent me an email and said, hey, Ms. Giles, I see that you're reading the book Dragons Loves Tacos. My daughter cannot stop talking about that book. I also see that you're studying grocery store. So I have an idea. Can I organize a field trip where we take all the kids to the grocery store and we have a Dragons Loves Tacos party? And I said, Mom, that is an incredible idea. I love that. And here is the cherry on top of the cake. Mom said, I will reach out to all the parents in the classroom and get chaperones with you so that you're not just taking 3 and 4-year-olds by yourself to the grocery store. And mom did, because if you know 3 and 4-year-olds moving them is like herding cats.
Yeah.
And so mom's just doing all these incredible things. We're continuing to communicate about her daughter's progress, about how things are going at home with her new baby brother. And mom is not only just advocating for her daughter in her classroom, but at the end of the school year, when schools are up for funding by the DC City Council, our school received at-risk funding, and we were in jeopardy of losing the funding. Mom testified in front of the DC Council to ensure that we would get the funding for the next school year.
Nice.
And she did all of these things because we built that trusting relationship.
Excellent. Wonderful.
So in Richmond, I was able to work in partnership with families to create the first ever Office of Engagement. And they tricked me because it wasn't really an office. It was me and an intern. Like, that's how we started.
Office of one.
It was the office of one, that's how we start off. But the central piece of evidence and research that I used to build the office was the dual capacity framework for building strong school partnerships with families. Like, that was the blueprint. It outlined what are the process conditions, what are the organizational conditions, and at the top is mutual trust. So knowing that, what we did is we started to think about how do we take existing things that we were already doing, existing funding, and really prioritize resources. Sometimes it's not always about price, it's about priority. So looking at the things that we already had and saying that, no, we are going to prioritize relationships because the goal is building trust. And with that as the blueprint, we were able to move from just individual strategies of engagement to what does it look like in terms of the organizational condition. It needed to be systemic, right? It needed to be integrated in all aspects. But that framework really provided the blueprint for our work.
Let's elaborate on that last point just a few minutes, because that system of support that you just described, system of engagement that you just described, is a through line from what I heard each of you talking about, where students win, families strengthen, and educators are more effective. But oftentimes in school districts, different functions across the district work in silos. Although there may be components of what drives their work speaking to family engagement, but they may not be talking to one another. So would any of you elaborate on what needs to happen in schools or in districts to bring that kind of coordination and alignment closer together to amplify the impact that is possible through family engagement?
So I think one of the first things is actually the step before that, because I would argue we actually aren't even talking about the same thing when we say engagement. So I think going back to what I talked about of that difference between involvement and engagement, right? So when you involve someone, you still have this service mindset. And, I was raised, Sade, you are a servant leader. It's not inherently bad. However, engagement is about partnership. And the difference between service and partnership is with partnership, you have to share power. And that's what's really hard to do. So to even be able to get to that point, you have to be able to define what it is we're talking about. Because if I define engagement as linked to learning, about sharing power, promoting advocacy, I'm going to move different because that's how I define engagement. So you won't get to that point. The first step is to really define what engagement is and have that common definition.
I would also say, in addition to that, I think DC Public Schools is a great example of how family engagement has moved from one person in one shop to being part of every office in the district. So when teachers are hired, they are asked questions around what's the value in family engagement. I used to lead teacher selection and recruitment at DC Public Schools. For principals, we ask around family engagement. For curriculum, DCPS thinks about right now with math, they have a whole program, Dream with Families, that focuses on How are families empowered to support their children's academic learning? All too often at a district level, it's exactly what you just said. It's silos. And it's because we often don't equip our most senior leaders with the talking points for how to go in front of a school board and talk about family engagement, knowing what they want to know is why was there only 0.6% growth in CAPE data and math over the last 2 years? It's our responsibility, all of us in this room, to make the case for why, if you invest in family engagement, you actually will see academic outcomes. But often we want to talk about academic outcomes and then we say, we'll get to family engagement when we get there. And so I think part of it is creating that shared definition and then making sure family engagement's in your strategic plan, family engagement's in your talent strategy, family engagement's in your resource allocation strategy. I've been on webinars with Eyal. He talks about what they do in California, but that's not necessarily enough, and it only exists in California. In DC, Title I funding, someone mentioned it earlier, it says at least 1%. So most districts do 1%. And so that's not enough. It's not enough to say we prioritize family engagement in our strategic plan unless we're really willing to put human capital capacity and funding behind it.
Excellent point. So this next question is about convincing others. And how do you talk with school leaders, board members, those in the community about the evidence and the return on investment to ensure that we improve student achievement and school improvement with family engagement as a lever for change? How do you do that? Stephanie, you want to start? No? Okay.
I can speak more at the school and speaking to other teachers. So
right.
prior to my role as the director of training facilitation, I was part of a cohort of teachers and parents who would train other fellow teachers on family engagement practices. And the feedback we would get from all sessions of what made the session so powerful was the storytelling from real teachers and from real parents. So we're hearing directly from parents about the impact of building a trusting relationship through a home visit. We're hearing directly from parents about the impact of academic partnering. We're hearing directly from teachers on these strategies. And so in our trainings, weaving in that storytelling really shows teachers, okay, I can do this. This is manageable. It might seem a crazy idea at the beginning of the school year, but there is a return on an investment. And it is a positive impact on our classroom. In my story, I again share how that parent became an advocate for our school because we built that relationship.
I think if you're going to create a system of engagement, you have to track engagement. You have to have data systems that track engagement. When we reframed attendance through an engagement lens, we didn't just have data systems for attendance. We looked at our home visits. We actually quantified engagement. So in a school community, we could say, yes, your chronic absenteeism is decreasing, but guess what? You increase home visits by 80%, but you cannot make those connections if you are not tracking engagement. So I think it's a powerful way to tell the story. A system, you can't have the practices without also the data systems, and that's really important.
I don't have anything to add. They hit the nail on the head.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I'm also getting the signal that we have 5 minutes left. So I am going to ask the dream question of the three of you. If there was anything that you would like to see more in the evidence or a gap in the evidence that we need, what might that be from a practitioner's point of view?
I think there's two things that come to mind for me. I think one is dedicated investments around our secondary family engagement, in particular our high school, and talking about both career and college options and how we engage with families around that. I think there's some implicit biases around why we treat secondary education the way that it is. So I think starting there. I also think the second is really spending some time around the school leader's role in family engagement practices. I think as a former school leader myself, it meant changing what we did in staff meetings, changing what we did in grade level meetings, releasing some PD time that I could have used for something else to create the space for my staff and my team to talk about what they were experiencing, to debrief the home visits that they went on, to plan for the academic parent-teacher teams and student-led conferences. And I think all too often we talk about this bottom-up approach. We talk about the educators, and then we talk about state-level superintendents, but we miss the school leader and the district leader and the incredibly important role that they play in this work. And so I think more of that is what we need.
Excellent point. Excellent.
You can tell Emily and I work together because I'm going to echo the school leader role. As a former educator, I moved around different schools, but they were all partners with Flamboyant. And you could see the passion and the vision they had for the school around family engagement. I will recall one school leader, before you could mention a question of so-and-so didn't turn in their homework, or I'm having an issue with so-and-so student, the first question the school leader asked, did you have a home visit with that student? And so that really showed the vision and the impact and the priority they made for family engagement.
I'm thinking about the amazing Dr. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot, and she has this beautiful quote, and she says that parents do not walk into the school building as individuals, but as representatives of their histories, their experiences, and their aspirations woven through the tapestry of their children's lives. So to be able to dream, to be able to have evidence that honors the history and the wisdom of our families, that really values and appreciates all that they bring would be my dream.
I also heard in that a methodology shift, right? Of how parents, and I think this was brought up earlier, how parents and caregivers can actually be a part of the research. Excellent.